The summer heat pressed down on Greystone like a heavy blanket, the kind nobody wanted but couldn't shake off. At the edge of this forgotten farming town in rural Nebraska, 13-year-old Leo Parker trudged along the dusty path, a wooden bucket swinging at his side. The small town had seen better days before the drought hit 3 years ago, turning fertile fields into cracked wastelands and hope into something people only remembered in whispers. Leo wiped sweat from his brow as he passed the rusted "Welcome to Greystone" sign. The population number had been scratched out and rewritten so many times it was now just a smudge. People kept leaving, searching for places where the earth still yielded something besides disappointment. "There he goes again," Mrs. Henderson muttered from her porch, rocking slowly in her chair as Leo walked by. "Poor Miller boy, still at it." Her husband grunted without looking up from his newspaper. Grief does strange things to people. First his mother, then the farm. Too much for a boy his age. Leo pretended not to hear them. He'd grown accustomed to being the subject of pitying conversations, of sideways glances and hushed tones that fell silent when he came too close. It had been 8 months since his mother passed away from cancer. 8 months since the last rain fell. 8 months since he'd started his daily ritual. The wooden bucket had belonged to his mother. It was one of the few things Leo had insisted on keeping when his father started selling off possessions to cover medical bills. The farm was gone now too, foreclosed by the bank 3 months ago, forcing them to move into a small apartment above the hardware store where his father now worked. Leo continued past the town limits to a small patch of land behind what used to be their property. His father had sold the farm to Mr. Gaines, a businessman from the city who planned to develop the land once the drought broke. But this small corner, this forgotten piece of earth surrounded by a broken fence, this was where Leo's mother had told him the story on one of her better days, when the pain medication allowed her moments of clarity. "Mum used to tell me about the tear of the sky," Leo had explained to his father once. "A flower so blue it looked like it had captured a piece of the heavens. She said it only blooms where faith is stronger than sadness." His father had looked at him with tired eyes and simply nodded, not having the heart to break whatever hope his son was clinging to. Leo reached the spot, marked only by a circle of stones he had arranged himself. The earth was parched, cracked and barren. Not a single weed dared to grow here anymore. The boy carefully set down his bucket and knelt beside it. "Hi, Mum," he whispered, his fingertips touching the dry soil. "I brought your favorite today." From his pocket, he pulled out a small stone, smooth and white, with faint blue streaks running through it. He placed it among the others in the circle. His mother had collected interesting stones all her life. This was one of the few he'd managed to save from her collection. "Dad's doing better," Leo continued, his voice the only sound besides the occasional distant rumble of tractors. "He doesn't cry at night as much. And Mrs. Wilson from the diner gives him extra pie to bring home sometimes." Leo dipped his hand into the bucket and let the water drip between his fingers onto the parched earth. The moisture disappeared almost instantly, absorbed by the thirsty ground. He'd gotten the water from the town's communal well that morning, carrying it nearly a mile in the summer heat. "I know everyone thinks I'm crazy," he said softly. "Maybe I am. But you always said that faith needs action behind it, or it's just wishing." Leo continued pouring water in a slow, careful stream, watching as each drop disappeared into the earth. This was his ritual. Water from the well, carried to this spot, poured with care and accompanied by stories of his day, memories of his mother, and sometimes just silence. The townsfolk whispered about the boy who wasted precious water on dead land, but Leo remained undeterred. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the empty fields, Leo emptied the last of his bucket. "See you tomorrow, Mum," he promised, rising to his feet and brushing dust from his jeans. On his way back, he passed the old Johnson place where his best friend Tyler lived. Tyler was sitting on the front steps, tossing a baseball against the wall of the house. "Still watering that patch of nothing?" Tyler asked, catching the ball mid-air. Leo shrugged. "Yep. My dad says it's a waste of water during a drought." Your dad says a lot of things, Leo replied without malice. Everyone in town had an opinion about what he was doing. He'd stopped trying to explain it months ago. Want to play some ball? Tyler asked, changing the subject. Leo glanced at his empty bucket, then at the darkening sky. I should get back. Dad will be home soon. As he continued walking, Leo could feel Tyler's eyes on his back, full of questions he couldn't answer. How could he explain that in that barren patch of earth he felt closest to his mother? That each drop of water was like keeping a promise, that the story of the blue flower was the last gift she had given him before the pain medications took away her lucid moments. Back at the apartment, Leo found his father already home, heating up leftover stew on their small stove. "Hey, champ," Robert Parker said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. At 43, he looked a decade older. His once dark hair now streaked with grey, his shoulders permanently stooped, as if carrying an invisible weight. "Hey, Dad," Leo replied, setting the empty bucket by the door. His father glanced at it but said nothing. They had an unspoken agreement. Robert wouldn't question Leo's daily ritual, and Leo wouldn't mention how his father still slept with his mother's sweater. "How was work?" Leo asked, washing his hands at the sink. "Same as always. Fix Mrs. Donovan's screen door again. That woman needs to stop letting her cat claw at it." He stirred the stew slowly. "How about you? Did you finish that summer reading for school?" "Almost," Leo said, though they both knew he'd finished the entire list weeks ago. Without the farm chores that had once filled his summers, Leo had turned to books to pass the time when he wasn't at his mother's spot. They ate dinner in comfortable silence, the kind that falls between people who understand each other's grief. Afterward, as Leo helped with the dishes, his father cleared his throat. "You know, son, school starts again in 3 weeks." Leo nodded, drying a bowl with careful precision. "I was thinking," Robert continued hesitantly, maybe we should start looking forward a bit more. Your mom wouldn't want us just standing still." Leo set the bowl down slowly. "I'm not standing still, Dad. I'm waiting." "For what, Leo?" his father asked gently. The boy looked up at his father, eyes suddenly fierce with conviction. "For something to grow." The first day of 8th grade arrived with the same relentless heat that had scorched Greystone all summer. Leo woke before his alarm, the weight of his new backpack hanging on his bedroom door, a reminder that life continued its forward march, regardless of loss or drought. "You got everything?" Robert asked over breakfast, checking his watch. The hardware store opened at 8, and he needed to be there early to receive a shipment. "Yeah," Leo replied, pushing cereal around his bowl. "Dad, I need to go to the spot before school." Robert sighed, setting down his coffee mug. "Leo, you'll be late." "I'll be quick, I promise." His father studied him for a moment, then nodded. 15 minutes, not a second more. Leo grabbed his bucket and hurried through the slowly awakening town. The morning light cast a golden hue over the dusty streets, and for a brief moment, Greystone looked almost beautiful. At the well, he filled his bucket halfway, enough for his ritual, but quick enough to keep his promise to his father. The path to his mother's spot was so familiar now that Leo could have walked it blindfolded. When he reached the circle of stones, he paused, frowning. Something was different. The ground seemed disturbed. Setting down his bucket, Leo knelt to examine the earth. Small footprints surrounded the area, animal tracks, probably from the wild rabbits that sometimes ventured close to town in search of food. But they hadn't touched his stone circle or the center where he poured his water. "First day of school, Mom," Leo said, continuing his routine despite the distraction. 8th grade. Same teachers as last year mostly. Mrs. Branson for English again, which is good. She doesn't mind when I read ahead." He poured the water slowly, watching as it darkened the soil. "Tyler says Coach Phillips might let me try out for the baseball team, even though I'm small for my age. Says I've got a good arm." Leo smiled faintly. "Remember how you used to pitch to me behind the barn?" Dad never could get the hang of it. When the bucket was empty, Leo stood, brushing dirt from his knees. He was about to leave when something caught his eye, a tiny patch of green, barely visible among the cracked earth. Leo dropped to his knees again, leaning close. There, in the center of where he poured water daily, was a small sprout, two tiny leaves reaching upward from the barren soil. Leo's heart pounded. Something was growing. After 8 months of faithfully watering dead earth, something had finally taken root. It was probably just a weed, he reasoned, or maybe a wildflower seed carried by the wind. But it was growing where nothing had grown for years. He was tempted to stay, to guard this fragile new life, but the town clock chimed in the distance, reminding him of his promise. Reluctantly, Leo picked up his bucket and headed for school, glancing back several times as if the sprout might disappear in his absence. The school day passed in a blur. Leo's thoughts remained with the tiny green shoot in his mother's spot. During lunch, he sat with Tyler and their small group of friends, only half listening to their summer stories and complaints about new teachers. "Earth to Leo," Tyler said, waving a hand in front of his face. "You haven't heard a word I've said, have you?" "Sorry," Leo mumbled, taking a bite of his sandwich. "What were you saying?" "I was asking if you're coming to tryouts next week. Coach said he needs new players since the Jenkins twins moved away." Leo nodded. "Yeah, I'll be there." "You okay?" Tyler asked, lowering his voice. "You seem weirder than usual today." For a moment, Leo considered telling Tyler about the sprout, but something held him back. It felt too fragile, too personal to share just yet. "Just first day stuff," Leo replied with a shrug. After school, Leo rushed home to drop off his backpack before grabbing his bucket. His father was still at work, which meant no one would rush him today. At the well, he ran into Mrs. Henderson filling her own container. "School started back up, I see," she said, eyeing his backpack. "How was your first day?" "Fine," Leo answered, waiting patiently for his turn at the well. Mrs. Henderson hesitated, then asked what had clearly been on her mind. "Still watering that patch out by your old farm?" Leo nodded, bracing himself for the usual pitying look or well-meaning advice. But instead, the old woman surprised him. "Your mother was a gardener, wasn't she? Before she got sick?" "Yes, ma'am," Leo replied. "She could grow anything. Had the best vegetables at the county fair 3 years running." Mrs. Henderson smiled, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "I remember, those heirloom tomatoes of hers were something special." She finished filling her container and stepped aside. "Well, keep at it, young man. Sometimes the things worth growing take the longest time." Leo filled his bucket, pondering her words as he made his way to his mother's spot. When he arrived, he immediately looked for the sprout, fear gripping his heart that it might have withered in the day's heat. But the tiny plant was still there, its 2 leaves reaching upward. Leo set down his bucket and settled beside it, cross-legged in the dirt. "I made it through the first day," he told both the sprout and his mother's memory. "Mrs. Branson assigned To Kill a Mockingbird. Said she knows I've probably already read it, but wants my perspective for class discussions." He poured water carefully around the sprout, making sure not to drown it or wash away the soil supporting its fragile stem. "Something's growing, Mom," he whispered, his voice catching. "I don't know what it is yet, but it's growing." For the first time in months, Leo felt something inside himself growing too, a small, fragile hope, taking root alongside the mysterious plant. By mid-September, the sprout had grown into a small plant with several leaves that didn't resemble any weed or wildflower Leo had ever seen. He'd borrowed a gardening book from the school library and spent hours poring over plant identification pages, but nothing matched the unusual leaf pattern of his mysterious plant. The summer heat had finally broken, giving way to cooler autumn mornings. Greystone remained locked in drought, the town's water conservation measures growing stricter as the well levels continued to drop. Yet Leo persisted with his daily ritual, though he now used a smaller container instead of the wooden bucket to avoid drawing attention to the amount of water he was using. Baseball tryouts had come and gone, with Leo earning a spot as a relief pitcher on the school team. The practices and occasional games gave structure to his afternoons, but nothing interfered with his visits to the plant. "Coach says I need to work on my fastball," Leo told the plant, as he carefully watered around its base. The plant was now about 6 inches tall, with sturdy leaves that had a silvery blue tint to them. Tyler's dad is helping us both with pitching techniques on Sundays. Leo had kept the plant a secret from everyone, even Tyler. Part of him feared that sharing it would somehow break the spell, that acknowledging this small miracle might cause it to disappear. Another part simply wanted something that belonged just to him and his mother's memory. As the plant grew taller, Leo had added a small ring of sticks around it for protection against rabbits and other wildlife. He'd also started bringing nutrient-rich soil from behind the school greenhouse, adding it bit by bit to the barren ground. One afternoon in late September, Leo arrived at his spot to find Mr. Gaines, the businessman who now owned their former farm, standing at the broken fence line, surveying the property with a man in a construction hat. Leo froze, his water container clutched tightly in his hands. He hadn't seen Mr. Gaines since the day of the farm sale, when the man had briefly shaken his father's hand before driving away in his expensive car. "The access road would cut through here, Mr. Gaines was saying, gesturing toward the area that included Leo's special spot. "Once this drought breaks, we'll start clearing the land for the first phase of development." The man in the hard hat nodded, making notes on a clipboard. "Shouldn't be much trouble. Land's already clear, nothing worth saving out here." Leo's heart hammered in his chest. They were going to bulldoze this place, destroy the plant he'd nurtured for weeks. Before he could think better of it, he stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Gaines." The businessman turned, surprise flickering across his face as he recognized Leo. "You're Robert Parker's boy, aren't you?" "Yes, sir. Leo Parker." He shifted uncomfortably under the men's curious stares. "I was wondering, there's a small section of land here that I've been looking after. It's just a tiny piece where those stones are in a circle." Mr. Gaines exchanged glances with the construction man. "Looking after how?" Leo swallowed hard. "My mother and I used to come here before she got sick. It's special to me." The businessman's expression softened slightly. "I remember about your mother. I'm sorry for your loss." He looked at the circle of stones, then back at Leo. "But this is private property now, son. The development plans are already approved by the town council." "I know, sir. Leo took a deep breath. "Could I show you something? It won't take long." Curiosity won out, and Mr. Gaines nodded. "5 minutes." Leo led the men to his circle of stones. The plant stood tall in the center, its silvery blue leaves catching the afternoon light. "I've been watering this spot every day since my mom died," Leo explained, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "This plant started growing a few weeks ago. I don't know what kind it is, but it's the only thing that's grown here since the drought started." Mr. Gaines knelt to examine the plant more closely. "Unusual looking. Might be some kind of native prairie flower. They can lie dormant for years until conditions are right." "Your watering awakened it," the construction man commented, sounding impressed despite himself. Leo looked directly at Mr. Gaines. "I'm not asking for the whole property back or anything, just this small corner, just until it flowers if it's going to flower. Then his voice faltered. "Then I'll let it go, Mr." Gaines studied Leo for a long moment, then looked out across the dry, barren land that had once been the Parker family farm. The development wouldn't begin until the drought broke anyway, which could be months or even years. "Tell you what," he finally said, "this corner can wait. We'll start development from the other side of the property." He gestured to the construction man to make a note. "But I can't promise anything beyond that. When the time comes to develop this section, we'll have to reassess." Relief flooded through Leo. "Thank you, sir." After the men left, Leo carefully watered his plant, whispering, "Did you hear that, Mom? We've got more time." That evening at dinner, Leo finally told his father about the plant. Robert Parker listened attentively, his fork paused midway to his mouth as Leo described the small miracle growing in the barren soil and his encounter with Mr. Gaines. "I should have told you sooner," Leo finished, "but I was afraid it might die and then it would be like losing a piece of her all over again," his father completed softly. Leo nodded, blinking back tears. Robert reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. "I'd like to see it, this plant of yours." The next morning, before the hardware store opened, Robert accompanied Leo to the spot. The rising sun cast long shadows across the barren field as father and son stood looking down at the slender plant with its unusual silvery blue leaves. Robert knelt beside it, his calloused fingers gently touching the soil around its base. "Your mother would love this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She always believed in nurturing things that others had given up on." Leo knelt beside his father. Do you think she would be proud?" Robert looked at his son, really looked at him, seeing the strength and determination that had carried this boy through grief that would have crushed many adults. "She is proud, Leo. So am I." As September gave way to October, Leo continued his daily visits. The plant grew taller and stronger, developing a slender stem that now reached Leo's waist. Still, there was no sign of buds or flowers. The townsfolk who had once whispered about Leo's strange ritual now watched with curious interest, some even stopping to ask about the mysterious plant's progress. One unusually cold October morning, Leo arrived to find frost covering the ground. Panic seized him as he rushed to check on his plant. To his relief, it stood tall and undamaged, its silvery blue leaves seemingly impervious to the cold. "You're tougher than you look," Leo told it, carefully breaking the thin layer of ice on his water container to continue his ritual. That afternoon, as Leo sat completing his homework beside the plant, Tyler finally asked the question that had clearly been on his mind for weeks. "Why this plant? Why is it so important to you?" Leo looked up at his friend, then back at the slender stem and silver blue leaves that had become such a significant part of his life. For the first time, he felt ready to share the story. "My mom told me about a flower called the tear of the sky," he began. "She said it only blooms where faith is stronger than sadness." November arrived with unexpected gentleness in Greystone. Though the drought persisted, the harsh edge of desperation that had gripped the town began to soften as small signs of resilience emerged. The general store expanded its inventory, the town council approved funds to deepen the community well, and Robert Parker was promoted to manager at the hardware store. For Leo, these changes registered as background noise to the main event unfolding in his life. His plant had begun to develop a bud. It appeared first as a slight swelling at the top of the stem, then gradually took shape as an elongated pod that grew larger with each passing day. "It's getting ready," Leo told his father over breakfast one Saturday morning. "Mrs. Henderson says plants know when to flower, that they wait for the right moment." Robert nodded, pouring more orange juice into Leo's glass. "Mrs. Henderson would know. Her roses won ribbons at the county fair before the drought." He hesitated, then added, "You know, your mother used to consult her about gardening problems." "Really?" Leo perked up. "Mom never mentioned that." "They weren't close friends or anything," Robert explained, "but they respected each other's green thumbs. Your mother once saved Mrs. Henderson's prized rosebush from some kind of fungus." This new connection to his mother sent Leo straight to Mrs. Henderson's house after breakfast. The elderly woman was surprised to find him on her porch, but invited him in for cookies when he explained his reason for visiting. "So, you want to know what kind of plant you've got growing out there, Mrs. Henderson said, settling into her rocking chair while Leo sat perched on the edge of the sofa. "From your description, it doesn't sound like anything I've grown, but you know a lot about plants," Leo persisted, "more than anyone else in town." Mrs. Henderson smiled at the compliment. "I know the common ones, sure, but nature has many mysteries, young man. Sometimes a plant appears that seems new because it's been waiting, dormant in the soil for decades, or even centuries, for exactly the right conditions." "Like what conditions?" Leo asked, leaning forward. "Well, soil chemistry, temperature, moisture." She paused, studying his eager face. "And sometimes just the right kind of attention, the right kind of care." Leo considered this. "It's going to flower soon. I can tell." "Then that's what matters," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "Not what kind it is, but that it's blooming at all. In this drought, on that barren piece of land, that's the real miracle." As Leo left with a paper bag of cookies for his father, Mrs. Henderson called after him, "Bring me a picture when it blooms. I'd like to see this miracle plant of yours." The following week, a rare cloud system moved over Greystone, bringing cool air but no rain. The bud on Leo's plant continued to swell, now distinctly elongated and showing the first hints of color, a deep, rich blue peeking through where the protective sepals had begun to part. Word had spread throughout the small town about Leo's mysterious plant. Even Mr. Gaines had stopped by again, bringing a plant expert from the State University who took soil samples and photographs but couldn't identify the species without seeing the full bloom. "Whatever it is, it's remarkable," the expert had told Leo, "to thrive in these conditions. I'd like to bring a team back when it flowers." Leo had nodded politely but felt a strange reluctance. The plant had become something personal, almost sacred. The idea of scientists studying it, perhaps taking samples or seeds, made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't articulate. On a crisp Sunday morning in mid-November, Leo woke with an inexplicable sense of anticipation. He dressed quickly and grabbed his water container without waiting for breakfast. "Where's the fire?" his father called from the kitchen as Leo headed for the door. "Just a feeling," Leo replied. "I need to check the plant." Robert studied his son's face, then nodded. "I'll come with you. Give me 2 minutes." They walked in comfortable silence through the quiet Sunday streets of Greystone. The sun was just rising, painting the eastern sky in brilliant streaks of pink and gold. As they approached the broken fence line of their former property, Leo suddenly stopped, his breath catching. In the distance, at his special spot, something blue glinted in the early morning light. "Dad," Leo whispered, his voice trembling. "Dad, look." Robert squinted toward where Leo was pointing, then his eyes widened. "Is that—" Leo broke into a run, his father close behind. As they reached the circle of stones, both stopped in wonder. The plant had flowered overnight. But calling it merely a flower seemed an understatement for the bloom that now crowned the slender stem. It was unlike anything either of them had ever seen. A large, trumpet-shaped blossom with petals that unfurled like delicate waves, each one a shade of blue, so intense it seemed to glow from within. The inner part of the flower deepened to an almost indigo hue, while the outer edges lightened to a blue that indeed resembled the clearest summer sky. "The tear of the sky," Leo breathed, tears filling his eyes. Mom was right. Robert stood motionless, one hand covering his mouth, eyes fixed on the extraordinary bloom. It's exactly how she described it," he finally managed. "I always thought it was just a story." Leo knelt beside the flower, not touching it, but leaning close enough to catch its scent, surprisingly sweet and fresh, like the air after a long-awaited rain. "I kept my promise, Mom," he whispered. "I didn't give up." And these, as the sun rose higher, casting its golden light directly on the flower, something remarkable happened. The intense blue petals seemed to catch and hold the light, reflecting it in ways that made the bloom appear to shimmer with an inner radiance. "It's like it's made of light itself," Robert murmured, kneeling beside his son. They remained there in silent wonder until the distant sound of church bells reminded them of the passing time. As they reluctantly prepared to leave, Leo remembered his water container. "I should still water it," he said, reaching for the container he dropped in his excitement. Robert placed a gentle hand on his arm. "I think, maybe, just for today, you can let it be. It's found its moment, Leo. It's done what it needed to do." Leo looked at his father, then back at the radiant blue flower. For the first time in nearly a year, he left his special spot without completing his watering ritual. Instead, he took a photograph with the camera his father had brought along, capturing the miracle they had witnessed. By afternoon, news of the extraordinary bloom had spread throughout Greystone. People began making the short walk out to see it, keeping a respectful distance from the circle of stones, but marveling at the unexpected beauty that had emerged from the barren earth. Mrs. Henderson declared it unlike any flower she'd ever encountered in 60 years of gardening. The plant expert from the university returned with colleagues, all of them puzzled and excited by what appeared to be a previously undocumented species. "They want to name it," Leo told his father that evening as they sat on their small balcony, watching the sunset. "The scientists, I mean. They're saying it might be a whole new species." "What do you think about that?" Robert asked. Leo was quiet for a long moment. "I think it already has a name. The one Mom gave it. The Tear of the Sky." Robert nodded. "It fits." The scientist asked if they could take samples, maybe dig it up to study the root system, Leo continued. "I said no." Robert raised an eyebrow. "That's your decision to make. It's your plant." "Is it, though?" Leo mused. "I didn't create it. I just believed in it, watered it when everyone thought I was crazy." He looked at his father. "Mom always said the best things in life aren't things we own, but things we nurture." The next day, a Monday, Leo asked permission to skip school. To his surprise, his father agreed without argument. They returned to the flower together, bringing Mrs. Henderson, Tyler, and a few others who had been kind to Leo during his months of grieving. The blue flower had fully opened now, its radiance even more striking in the clear morning light. The circle of onlookers stood in respectful silence as Leo stepped forward and addressed the small gathering. "My mom told me about this flower before she died," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion visible on his face. "She called it the tear of the sky and said it only blooms where faith is stronger than sadness. I didn't understand what that meant until now." He looked around at the faces watching him, Mrs. Henderson with tears in her eyes, Tyler shifting awkwardly but attentive, his father standing tall with pride visible in every line of his body. "For almost a year I came here every day, because it was the only way I knew to keep her memory alive. I thought I was waiting for something to grow, but really I was growing too. We all were." Leo gestured to the circle of stones, the barren land, and the brilliant blue flower standing defiant against the backdrop of drought. "This flower doesn't belong to me, it belongs to all of us, to Greystone. It's proof that beautiful things can grow in the hardest places if we care enough to nurture them." Robert stepped forward and placed an arm around his son's shoulders. "Leo's right. This flower represents something we all need to remember. That hope isn't just wishing for better days. It's the work we do while we're waiting for them." In the days that followed, something subtle but profound shifted in Greystone. The town council voted to designate the small corner of land as a protected space, with Mr. Gaines not only agreeing, but donating an additional acre surrounding it to create a small community garden for when the rains return. The plant experts confirmed what Leo had somehow known all along. The blue flower was indeed a previously undocumented species. They respectfully honored his wish to call it Caelolacrima, the scientific Latin translation of tear of the sky. As November turned to December, the extraordinary bloom finally began to fade, its petals gradually losing their vibrant color. Leo watched this process with a surprising sense of peace rather than sadness. The plant had completed its purpose, not just in flowering but in what it had awakened in him and in Greystone. On the first anniversary of his mother's passing, Leo visited the spot alone. The flower was gone now, but the plant remained, its silvery blue leaves still healthy despite the continuing drought. As he poured his daily offering of water around its base, Leo noticed something new, tiny offshoots beginning to emerge from the soil around the main stem. "Look at that, Mom," he said softly. "It's not ending, it's just beginning." In the distance, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, the first promising signs of a weather pattern change that the meteorologists had been cautiously monitoring for weeks. As Leo walked home, he felt the first drop of rain in over a year touch his cheek, as perfect and precious as a tear from the sky.